Well, welcome friends and Lead 24/7 alums and others that may watch this, maybe even some friends of our guest today. This is our latest Zoomcast where we invite interesting people, at least people I find interesting, to tell their stories and kind of just share how they got to be where they are and some of the things that make them who they are. I believe stories are really often compelling and informational. There's good information in there, and they're often inspiring. That someone else's story can inspire my own story. So that's what we're doing. I'm excited today to welcome Dr. Ron Bonnstetter. Ron is the Senior Vice President of Research and Development for an organization called Target Training International. If you've gone through our Lead 24/7 program, we use some of their assessment tools. He's also Professor Emeritus from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, and maybe he'll share a little bit more about that. He's a regular speaker to national and even international audiences on the brain and human behavior. He was recognized in 2012 with the Edison Award. I'll let you look that up to find out what that is. And he's been featured in several publications, including Harvard Business Review. And so, Ron, I just want to thank you for being with us. We first met about a year ago when we were pivoting in the pandemic, and we decided, what if we got some really high-level leaders and interesting people and did a 4-week version, really compressed, of Lead 24/7. And that's where I got to really know you, Ron, and felt really privileged to be your coach for those 4 weeks. And so before you tell your story, is there anything I missed about kind of what people, when they introduce you to international audiences, that they sometimes will share?
Well, that sounds like an egotistic set me up. But a couple of things did come to mind. And I think it's important to this whole story. And what comes to mind is, wow. First of all, the fact that my program at the University of Nebraska, teacher education, was selected for the outstanding teacher preparation program in the nation. And so I was doing some things in teacher preparation that other people weren't doing, and documenting that in ways that got someone's attention. And then I ended up being the first recipient of the outstanding teacher educator in the nation, a senior educator. And so those two things sort of set that tone for that part of my life. And then I moved down here. I retired from the university, at least from teacher education, brought my research down here. And 4 years after just focusing on my research, I received the First Person Science Award from the International Society for Neural Research. I say that because all of a sudden there's something that happened in two separate fields, that I moved to the top of two separate fields. And so you have to start wondering what was going on that would cause that.
Yeah. Well, so let me say this. I know you well enough to know you to be a humble person. And I know it's hard for you to share that. So thank you for sharing that, because I want our audience to understand more about how impressive you are. And you'd be the last person to say you're impressive. But in my eyes, you're very impressive. And I feel very honored that you would do this Zoomcast with me today, and for those that kind of follow Lead 24/7 and Leading by Design. So, and maybe you'll even send this to some of your friends. So I feel great that you are our special guest today.
So where would you like to start? Where do you want me to start?
Tell me a little bit about your childhood, maybe 5 minutes or so, and then a little bit of how did you end up being at the University of Nebraska, and what did you do there more? Tell us more about what you did there. And then I'm going to ask you, how did you end up being at Target Training International, and what are you doing there?
Well, it really is an interesting path. And I'll tell you, I think it's important for each of us to recognize where our motivation comes from and to put that in a proper perspective. And by the way, that's not always positive. In my case, I have been driven most of my life by what somebody tells me I can't do. And I'm not proud of that, but at least I'm at an age where I can recognize now that maybe I rethink this and do it for the right reasons, because historically I've done it for the wrong reasons. And it really started with moving to a new community in an age where education had decided that we could really maximize things by separating classes and allowing the special students, the better students, to work together and then not be held back by the others. So in fourth grade, I was moved to a room and basically told I was dumb. And that left an impression because I didn't think of myself that way. Now, I have to tell you that I'm extremely dyslexic. And so any teacher in the fourth grade would have written me off because I still was having trouble. I had my nameplate, on my desk until, way after everybody else. Of course, Bonnstetter was more of a challenge, than Price. But at any rate, I ended up, and I'm telling you this because it started to create a little bit of, I have to fight for what I get. And I'm also a high D for those that actually have a feel for DIS and C. And so you combine those two and you see a pattern starting to emerge where even in high school, when I went to the guidance counselor to figure out what to do after high school, she said that it looked like I had a good job there. I could be a hired man on my dad's farm. And I thought, but I want to be a scientist. And so then she opened the book and she showed me that I could be a lab tech and I could wash glassware. I walked out of that meeting and I thought, I am never going to listen to somebody else telling me what I can be.
Thank you.
And so, it's both positive and negative. But I tried to use that as a positive, but you have to watch it so closely because it can quickly become a negative.
Yeah.
So off to college I go, and I want to make a statement that I think is important to me. And I've recently talked to a new PhD, and they had laid out their entire career, not only the pathway, but the time frames. And I laughed and I said, I'm sorry, I know this is what you think you really want to do, but you need to realize that life is a journey, not a destination. And you need to be open to possibilities. And you don't know what doors are going to open. And so just really recognize that every day is an opportunity. You can say yes or no, it's a different path, but please don't lay it all out. I think you're going to set yourself up for failure, but more importantly, you're going to set yourself up to lose wonderful opportunities.
Yeah. I often will talk about having a plan from which we'll deviate.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so it's good to plan, but
yes.
Boy, do not fall in love with your plan.
And by the way, that works for vacations too, because I see so many people on airplanes and in airports that are so angry about changes that occur that are outside of their control, when in fact it's a journey. And there's something magical. When I get ready to travel, I know this is not going to go the way I thought it was. There's going to be deviations, and I probably will meet some very interesting people.
Yeah.
So just an interesting path. So at any rate, I go off to college, and college doesn't go well. I ended up sort of hanging around with the wrong group and rebelling a great deal. I had two of my friends killed on the way to pick me up to go to a party. Education was just in the toilet for me. I didn't know what to do. And some professor, Dan Pease, all of a sudden made a case for me in a community college that I should be a future leader of America.
How cool is that, Ron? That's so cool.
How many times does an F student get selected for
He saw something. He saw something in you.
So I ended up getting an opportunity to work with the head of the Ford Foundation that summer. And that opened my eyes to a whole new world. I mean, I'm a little boy growing up on an Iowa farm community of 300 people. And so hanging around Ford Foundation was sort of a different world.
Yeah.
From that, I moved on. I went to Mankato State, another small college. Remember, I'm not God's gift to education here. So I get up there and I need to make money. And so I realized that if I could be selected to be in a dormitory, like a dorm rep or something, I could get free housing. And so I ended up making a case for that in the residence and ended up getting a position. And then along comes this opportunity. They're going to organize residence halls across the nation. And again, one thing led to another. It's a journey. I never planned this. I get my floor rep in Sering Center. From that, I become the Minnesota College University Residence Hall Association president. From there, I get elected to the executive board. And the executive board meets once a month somewhere in the nation with 6 of us that plan out what needs to take place in residence halls to protect students, including creating an insurance process so that you could insure a dorm room, which did not exist back then. So it's just interesting things and interesting people that you start to meet. So then I go off and I start teaching 8th grade science. And I decide I don't want to be an 8th grade science teacher the rest of my life. So I wander over to the University of Iowa, which was about 40 miles away, and have a conversation and figure out that I actually could maybe work on a master's while I'm teaching 8th grade. And so I drive over there, do evening classes, late afternoon classes, and in 2 years, I get that master's out of the way. And now I have a vision again. I'm going to be a community college teacher. I had a good experience in community colleges. I could make a difference there. So I drive to Des Moines, Iowa to meet with the director of community college services. It was a big heavyset guy in this office. And I walk in and I say, I'm going to finish my master's and I want to be a science teacher in a community college. And he laughs at me. And he says, every high school teacher thinks they could be a community college teacher. A, there are no jobs, and B, why do you think you're qualified just because you taught 8th grade? And remember the beginning of this story. I had 3 hours driving back where I did nothing but get angry.
Yeah.
And I thought, what would I do to prove him wrong? So I went back to my office, and over the next week, I designed a 2-year curriculum that would be transferable to a 4-year college based on environmental studies, so that you could leave in 2 years and be a technician in water and wastewater and conservation, or you could transfer all that into fish and wildlife or ecology into a university. And I sent 72 letters out to community colleges across the nation saying, this is a program that I'm prepared to run in your college.
Ron, how old were you about this point? When
23.
you sent, how old?
23.
When you sent out 72 letters.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Well, I only got one back, but I took that job. And so I started teaching in a community college. And again, our past sort of dictates our future in ways we don't even recognize. When I got there, I ran into a group of students that were just awesome human beings. They had a common characteristic among them. A, they couldn't afford to go to a 4-year college. And B, they didn't believe they deserved to go to a 4-year college. And I'm starting to really identify with these kids. And so part of my 2-year program with them was based on Outward Bound. And the fact that I had a background in education that was very unique, because when I finished at Mankato State, I did my student teaching in the last existing Summerhill school in the United States. I don't know if you know what Summerhill is about.
I don't. Tell me about Summerhill schools.
Summerhill is an innovative program where, first of all, it's K-12 interdisciplinary and interage. I had 32 children I worked with that were K through 12. Wow. And everything that we taught was project-based. Yeah. And so a project, then from the project emerges the history of the project, the science of the project, the literature of the project. Love it. So you tie it all together holistically, and you have different age groups that are all working together. It's just sort of mind-blowing to think that you could pull all that together, and yet it is so exciting when it works.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I started running basically an Outward Bound program for the community college students.
And had you done Outward Bound?
No.
So Okay, so just from reading and studying it, you figured you could, very
Well,
interesting.
and we started small. I mean, we
Yeah.
started things like, okay, instead of class today, we're going to actually go out into the field and our class will be out in the swamp. Or we're going to build an ice shed and we're going to, on weekends, if you want, we're going to have classes on ice fishing and what we can learn in ecology sitting around there. Or we're going to get a 26-foot Cheyenne lodge and we'll set it up on the Des Moines River and you can check it out on weekends and stay in the lodge and have this huge teepee set up. And just anything that would make sense. And of course, I started to now get into trouble because I'm different.
Yeah.
So the first thing that happened was that I was called in and told that I used the motor vehicles more than other professors. And so I needed to cut back and not be checking out vehicles all the time. And I couldn't imagine how you teach ecology, in a lecture. But at any rate, so I told my class, and again, here's another thing, is that we did this together. So I tell my class the problem and I say, how could we solve this? And at one point, a student said, there's a sale of government vehicles this weekend. Why don't we just buy our own bus? And as stupid as that sounded,
Not at all. Well,
I actually had some money in a budget. And so for $700, we bought an old school bus. And we took that school bus to Florida 6 times.
so cool.
And we painted it. And at that time, I was working in Iowa Lakes Community College. And so we named it, we painted it blue and green. And on the side was Ecology Club of Lakeland, Iowa. We only used the abbreviation, E. coli. So we had so much fun just putting.
And I assume you got in even more trouble.
Yeah.
Because the only thing worse than doing something different is to do something different that's incredibly successful. That'll really bother people.
Yeah. Okay, let's jump ahead with that theme in mind. So I leave the community college, I go and I work on a PhD, and I finished my PhD, and at this point, I'm actually coordinating the first $1 million grant in science education at the University of Iowa. And so I'm postdoc, but I'm running a grant. And at a conference, a gentleman comes up and says, would you be interested in actually taking my position? If I move to elementary, you could do secondary. And so I said, yeah, I'd be interested. So I went to the University of Nebraska and interviewed and ended up getting the job then as the director of secondary science education there. Now I'm taking all these experiences. I'm taking Summerhill, my Outward Bound experience, and my experience in running field trips and just making education come alive. And I take all of that vision into a teacher preparation program. Plus, along the way, I'm starting to get really excited about this new field. Now, some of us are old enough to remember what's really on the forefront and on the horizon that's going to change the world. When I was a student, Jacques Cousteau and oceanography was, just, I wanted to be a Jacques Cousteau. And then, of course, then we have the space age and all the things that are going on there. And the new thing that started to hit me at about this point was neurology and this field of brain science that just seemed to be exploding. So I go to the University of Nebraska with the idea that I'm not going to teach Deweyism, or I'm not going to teach behaviorism. Yeah. I'm going to teach how to build dendrites. I'm going to teach how learning occurs and how we can move people from short-term memory to long-term memory. And all of a sudden it changes everything about how you teach. And with that mindset. So again, moving ahead quickly, 3 years later, there's an opportunity to write up what you do in your teacher preparation programs.
And let me just pause for a moment. How old are you at this point?
I'm probably 27, 28 now.
Okay.
Oh, no, actually, I'm a late riser because, see, I took those years at the community college and then I went back for my PhD. I finished my PhD at a late age. I finished it at 33.
Okay, so you're in your 30s, still very, very young, and you're shaking the world.
Well, maybe. So I write up what I'm doing, And they had this national search for excellence in science education. And Bill Ritz at San Diego State calls me and he said, I've been reading all this stuff. And he said, I need to talk to a few of your students to see if it's real. So I let him talk to my students, and all of a sudden I get invited to Washington, and Carl Sagan is giving me an award for outstanding teacher preparation program in the nation.
Oh, cool.
And at that point, we're backstage, and he says, I have no idea why I'm giving you this award. Give me your elevator pitch. What is it you do? And I thought about it quickly, and I thought, I got to. And the first time I used the term, I teach the science of self. Because
Nice.
I realized that I could not prepare a teacher to teach children when in fact they were children themselves. They didn't understand themselves. And my brother started to fit into this picture when I went to the University of Nebraska too, because see, I was a new PhD. And by the way, new PhDs are closer to God than most people. And some people forget that, but they're very arrogant people. You know, they've just gone through this process and they have a chip on their shoulder. So, you know, smile at a new PhD and say, yeah, you too will get over this.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I got over it quickly because I failed as a teacher at the university. My first semester was chaos. I had students crying at the end of first period that I had them in class. And so I called my brother and he said, well, you know, you should be using some assessments on your students. And so I started using at that time just a behavior assessment. And here's what I discovered. I was the problem, not them. They were all SCs. In other words, they wanted things laid out. I'm a D. I came in and I said on the first day, we're going on a journey. And what we do today will dictate what we do tomorrow. And there will be no test because I have no idea how to test with a paper and pencil how you're going to be a good teacher. And they're freaking out. How am I going to be graded? What are we going to do? How do I prepare?
Yeah.
They're freaking out. I'm happy as a clam because it's my vision and I'm communicating with my style. And so I started to realize that I had to really, really communicate. And I needed to learn to communicate only by learning about other people and learning about what they're about.
Yeah.
So that's where that program evolved. And in fact, the science of self was part of my program. When I came back, again, I was not a favorite child in the teacher's college because again, I taught neurology. I didn't teach how to give a test. And so finally, the department head asked me if I would give a talk to the faculty about my program. And I did, and about halfway through, he stands up when I'm talking about using these assessments to help students learn about self. He stands up and he puts his hands on the table and he leans toward me and he says, we do not use tarot cards for decision making.
Wow.
And I don't think he was prepared for my answer. My answer was, you're absolutely right. And I've been looking for a focus on my research and thank you. So I decided that day, again, wrong motivation, but to figure out how these assessments actually work.
Yeah.
And are they good?
Are they legit? Yeah.
Are they legit?
Yeah.
And so I changed, and the first thing I did is I realized, of course, I have degrees now in biology, geology, energy engineering, environmental engineering, and science education, but I know nothing about neurology, okay? So I go over to the University of Nebraska Med Center in Omaha, 60 miles away, and I start interviewing department heads. And I say, I'm over here doing this and this, and I want to learn how learning occurs. And department after department said, we don't do that. That's not what we're about.
Crazy.
Well, I understood that. So finally, I'm in the office, you know, it's probably fourth trip, and I end up in epilepsy, the Center for Epilepsy. And Dr. Senge is in there, and I explain what I want to do, and he says, I'll tell you what, I'll form a relationship with you. If you come over on Tuesdays and take Tuesdays to be with my residents and I, you can go through grand rounds. We will teach you to read EEG. We will teach you about the brain and what goes on in the brain. if you will work at least once a month with my residents in
Hmm.
communication skill development.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
so I did listening skill development. I did empathy training with their residents. And I had good crowds coming from the Med Center, other departments coming in all their little white coats to get sessions on those luncheons that I did on communication skill development. But in the process, I learned a great deal about EEG. Now I'm still running a program and I got students that I'm doing too much with. And so my research floundered until I moved down here. I retired from the university and came down here, and my brother said, I think there's a role for you to take your research and figure out how it really interplays with our business.
And for our listeners, here is in Phoenix, I assume?
Well, Scottsdale, yeah. And
Scottsdale.
so I came down, and now my brother was he's passed away, but he was an interesting character, very self-driven, maybe with some of the same demons that I had on my shoulder, in addition to the problems of growing from a small town and trying to be a big fish in a little pond. He was also short and red-haired. So I think he had these other things going on. But at any rate, when I get down, because he is so driven, he'd set up my lab. Now he knows nothing about this stuff, and I'm going to run a lab, and I was a little irritated. So again, opportunities. I hear through the grapevine that there's this conference going on in the Valley, and lo and behold, the conference is the International Society for Neurofeedback and Research. And it sounds like something that could give me some insights. Furthermore, it is 3 miles from my house. So I wander over there on a Friday night. I'm not registered for the conference, but nobody stopped me walking into the exhibits. And so I walk in, and all of a sudden I see the machinery my brother has bought me for research. It's sitting there. So I walk up and I said, I own that. I want to do event-related potentials, and I have no idea how this interfaces with that. Tom Kalura was the gentleman, and he said, it doesn't, but it could. And I said, what do you mean? He said, Bill, take over the booth for a minute. So we go over to one of those tall little round tables that are at conferences, and he pulls out some white paper and he starts drawing on it. And 2 hours later, he said, I think I can change my software to do what you want it to do.
Wow.
And so he said, but we didn't really accomplish this today. Can you meet next week, like on a Wednesday? That was in 2011. And today at noon, again, I will meet with Tom Kalura. We have been meeting every Wednesday since 2011. And the result of that is that we keep pushing each other in terms of things we're learning and things we're doing and expanding on. And as a result of him, we have 2 patents on the process of looking at ipsative assessments, like my brother's, self-reporting assessments, and looking at what the brain is doing when it processes an answer. How exciting to be able to literally see the brain while it's deciding an answer.
So, Ron, for me, this would have been a little scary too, because your brother had a lot invested in these assessments, and you're about to look really at, are they legit?
Yeah.
And there, there could be quite an issue there, but I'm assuming you have found, and what I'm thinking of doing, by the way, if you would come back sometime for another Zoomcast, I'd love to learn more about your research. Not
yeah,
your
because
story
we
as
just,
much.
yeah, it's like we just opened the door for you right now.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
This is the exciting part. I will set the
But
tone.
let me ask. I assume you found them to be legit, or else you wouldn't still be there.
Yes, but I also have the privilege of working with a company that believes in transparency.
Nice.
And they believe in continual improvement. And
Okay, so let me ask you back to your story then. So you show up, your brother's bought you this equipment, obviously a pretty smart dude. And so then how did those next years go?
well, we start bringing people in, and another key character in this is a gentleman by the name of Dustin. who works with me all the time in the lab. And he reinvented himself by reading and working with me. And frankly, it's scary, but I guess every teacher hopes that students get better than they are. But Dustin knows more about neurology than I'll ever know. And he's just done all that on his own in the last 10 years. So the two of us run this lab and put together experiments where we have people take our assessments while we are collecting EEG data. And all of that has been, and what we discovered is, yes, there are a number of items that just really correlate exactly with what the brain is thinking. There are other items that people double think. And they go, I wonder what they want the real answer to be. And all of a sudden, we're seeing the brain switching from I agree, I disagree, I agree, I disagree. And all of that is occurring in microseconds. And it's just awesome to see how the brain processes decisions.
Yeah. Well, it is so fascinating to me. It is one of the reasons I wanted to ask you to be one of our guests. It's because what you are doing is so fascinating. And I can see now we need to have a separate session on what are you learning, and not so much your story, but what you've learned. But so let me just highlight one thing I'm seeing very clearly out of your life, and everyone's life is different. But if you had planned your work and worked your plan, you would have missed out on huge changes in your life, huge events that have led you to where you are. Now, who knows if great planners who work their plan, maybe that does work better for them. But it's obvious from your story that just being open to what might, I'm a believer in God, and most that know me know that. So it's like, what might God be up to with this? And I'm always curious about the mystery of the journey. And I just think that's really important, but maybe not for every single person. And then, so another thing that's just really clear to me that out of your story is there's great passion, not always out of a place of light. It's sometimes out of a place of, I'll prove you wrong. And I've run into this with a lot of great achievers. And clearly that's part of your story. And I love that you recognize that and you're trying to manage that so that these passions don't become monsters inside you. But I'm going to be so bold to ask, what's your age right now? Because Ron, because I want to make a point. So you're like 55 or what are you?
72.
72. Okay. I knew you were over 55. Rate your passion level at this point in your life compared to earlier points in your life.
As I said to Tom Kalura last week in our call, Tom, I want to pursue this new research agenda because I'm still convinced there's something out there I'm intended to do that I've not done. And I don't know what it is. But just hang with me and help me because I know there's something there that we're still going to accomplish that will make a difference. And I need your help.
So that's inspiring to me, a 64-year-old. And I see the passion in you. And yet we have to find our own, we have to identify with what's put in us to be passionate for. But you're probably going to, at 102, still be passionate about this and that. And your wife's going to have to reel you in because it can take you over. But so speak to that a little bit.
Well, I think this idea of balance and where the passion comes from, the passion has always been there. And I seem to get excited about whatever I do. And whatever I do 100% or more. At one point, first of all, my wife's a social animal. I go along for the ride. So we're out with a couple that I, of course, don't know because she's made the relationship because I sound like an extrovert, but I'm an introvert at heart. And I just love to get consumed in what I'm working on. And well, that's led to a lot of stories too, including marriage counseling at one point when my wife says to the marriage counselor, last night, I realized we have a problem in our marriage when at 8 o'clock in the morning, I get a phone call and I say, I have to go see if he's in bed. I don't know if he came home last night. Because sometimes I would work all night in the lab. I'd get going on something, I just couldn't stop.
Yeah.
And so I had no balance. And so along the way, it didn't hit home until the social gathering where the gentleman says, tell me about yourself. And of course, I go off on whatever I'm into that point, probably teacher education and some field trips that I'm running with students. And he said, no, 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 tell me about you. And I tell you, I reflect on that all the time because at that point in my life, it was a turning point, and I realized I had no me except through my work.
Yeah.
There was no me. All I was is my work.
Yeah.
And you
Well,
have to question that.
and so from a transparency standpoint, again, I think I know you well enough that you are just an open book. So as we were preparing for this, you have a PowerPoint slide, deck. It is more about your work than about you. Is that fair to say? and I'm just really interested in you. And so I want other leaders to hear that because it is this balance to do life well and to lead well and be someone worthy of following. You have to figure out there's me and there's my work, which is, so intertwined, but it's not one and the same. And so I'm thankful that you're able to and willing to share your story with me today. And I promise I'll get you back, and I'd love to, if you're willing, to record some of the stuff you're excited about right now that you're learning about the brain. What stirs up in you as I share that?
Well, that it's a yin and yang, and it's not ever been conquered. At that point, I realized there was no me other than my work, so I decided that I needed hobbies. And I turned every hobby I have ever had into another job and to another passion.
Yeah.
The most recent, I've probably got 30 different hobbies that I could show you that is not an ordinary hobby. I mean, I started scuba diving, so then I went from being a scuba diver to being certified as an instructor in NAUI, PADI, and YMCA. And then from that, I got open water seal diving and cave diving certification and ice diving certification and a dry suit. And it just went bananas. Most recent is my wife decided we're going to drink coffee. And so 4 years ago, I started to make coffee. Well, if you're going to make coffee, maybe you should do something with it. And so now I post a coffee design every morning on Instagram, and I design coffees that are followed all over the world by people. I don't just make coffee.
You are something else. And do I recall, so when you're talking about scuba diving, I think I heard you talk about Jacques Cousteau. Did you ever get a chance to meet Jacques Cousteau?
I did. And that is another interesting story. And it's a journey again. My advisor was a person who pushed me to be more than I thought I could be. So he said, I want you to be my assistant this summer. That's why I'm first year on my PhD. So I want you to be my assistant this summer and work with me. I'll pay you, but you have to set aside money for two things. Number one, life membership to the National Science Teachers Association. If you're serious about being in this profession, you have to be a professional. And number two, I want you to attend the World Council for Science Education in Paris. Okay. So to get a trip that was reasonable, I had to go about 4 days early to get a good price. So I show up in Paris 4 days before the conference, and I go to where the conference is at UNESCO, and nobody has a clue what this conference is. I'm walking around in Paris. I am a kid. I am 30 years old, and I have never been out of the country, and I don't know what I'm doing. And finally, they said, I think there's a name of Jacques, so on third floor. So I go to third floor. Third floor is like a warehouse full of crap. The hallways are full of dead machines and piles of paper. And down the end, I see this gentleman. I say, I'm Ron Bonnstetter from the United States, and I'm here for the World Council meeting. And he says immediately, do you know how to run a Xerox machine? I said, yeah. He said, I need 500 copies of this before the conference. And he leaves. And so I'm there all day after having flown all night, and I'm running 500 copies and putting together these booklets for a conference in total isolation. He comes back at 4 o'clock and he says, wow, you got them all done? I said, yeah, I'm real close. He said, well, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, I guess nothing. He said, where are you staying? I said, I don't know. I'm a kid. He said, why don't you stay with me? Well, he's the executive director. And when in the next 2 days, every one of the executive board are staying with Jacques, including me. So I'm listening to all the conversations about how we're going to set this conference up. And along the way, somebody says, well, Ron's here. Why don't we have him run one of the committees? So I'm running a committee. Then I have to make a committee report. And I make the committee report, and I'm on stage before Jacques Cousteau. So
That's crazy.
I do my report, I do the introduction, I get out of there, and Jacques comes up. And so that was cool to be on stage and actually with Jacques Cousteau and shake his hand and be there. So that was a neat thing. On the last day of the conference, I go up and I do my final report on the thing. And afterwards, I'm with my advisor in the back of the hall, and this is another learning experience. And this gentleman comes up and he says, that was a phenomenal talk. You summarized this conference, you gave us an idea, and you gave it to us in a passionate manner with a real sense that this could be accomplished, because I was actually putting an agenda together for education for Africa. At any rate, I said to him, when I walked up there, I really didn't have a clue what I was going to say. And he sort of walked off. And my advisor turned to me and he said, I have never been madder than I am at you right now. I said, why? Well, I just told him the truth. He said, no, you didn't. You lied. You said you were unprepared. You went up there with notes and you looked at your audience and you determined what was working and what was not working, and you modified on the spot to make it happen. And secondly, you insulted him. You told him he had no ability to determine quality. And he said, the next time this happens, I want you to just say thank you.
Yeah. You know what's interesting, Ron, is earlier in life, you had people telling you you're not worthy and you can't do it. And you figured out how to let that feed you. Later in life, you have people like me telling you, you're stinking amazing, man. And I'm not sure you figured out yet how to, other than this great advice, say thank you. Anyway,
now,
so
I think each of us have those demons to fight. I
yeah,
have a
absolutely.
fraud syndrome. I have a fraud syndrome that I fight every day.
Every one of us has our own battles to do and our own brilliance to offer the world. I just want to say thank you for sharing your story. If you're willing, at some point, I'd love for you to share this. You have just such interesting information about the brain and the research that you've been doing, just for your own sake, but also for Target Training International, an amazing organization. And
well, if you're willing to have me back, and I want people to look for the second video, because I'll tell you, if we can do it again, I will talk about how we really are looking at the asymmetry of the brain and decision making. I'll show you some things about nonverbals and being able to read, and that we actually are reading nonverbals and totally unaware of it all the time. And I'll even talk about the role of music in meditation and some of the brain changes there. Yeah, we could have fun.
We're going to have a lot of fun. And I could have talked for 4 hours with you about your life, because I know we only got the tip of the iceberg of a bunch of things that have happened to you where you took lessons away. But I do like to keep these to 30 to 40 minutes. So I promise I'm gonna reach out to you again, and maybe soon. Who knows? Maybe we'll be wearing the same clothes, because maybe it's right after this. No,
I do want a closing comment, though.
Okay.
You gave me the privilege of being a part of your workshop this summer. And what I would like to say about that is that workshops like yours are absolutely crucial throughout our lives. You have to be humble enough to realize all the time that you don't know enough. And that you need to grow. And you could be growing to the last day of your life, and that's the way to live your life. And things like your program were very growing for me. Interacting with those people and listening to you and learning from you was a chance for me to reflect and to grow. And I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I so appreciate your comments. I know you well enough to know that those are authentic and sincere. And you had to know that when you were joining this group of 8 people that were going to go through this 4-week version compressed, I'm like, I don't have anything to teach Dr. Ron Bonnstetter. But like all great leaders and all great learners, everyone goes into every situation going, you sure do. And sometimes it's just reminders, but we probably need reminders as much as we need instruction.
And even my background is a metaphor, a reminder.
Yeah.
That's Trinity College in Dublin, and that's the library at Trinity College. And until we've gone through every book, we got a lot more to do.
Yeah, amen. Ron, thank you so much. It's such a joy, and I look forward to our next Zoomcast, whenever that will be. So be well, my friend.